You saw the title and the thumbnail on this video. You know what I'm talking about here. I want to talk about 5 great games that have awesome female protagonists. Remember, this is my own personal opinion and meant to be a fun conversation starter or a list of games that someone can look to if they want to play something with a great female lead. With that being said, let's get into it. The first game on my list is Hellblade, specifically Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade stars Senua. But who is Senua? She is a picked warrior who experiences disturbances and hallucinations as a result of psychosis. I personally prefer the first game in the series, but the character of Senua is consistent across both games. In the first game, she's trying to bring her murdered lover back from hell. To do this, she has to battle her way through many enemies and the unforgiving world itself. Senua is a fighter. She was dealt a terrible hand in life, but that doesn't stop her from persevering against incredible odds. She's also one of the best depictions we have of what someone who is experiencing psychosis might experience. Because Ninja Theory, the developers behind this game, they really did their research when it comes to trying to portray what living with this would be like. Why do I like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice? Like I said, I prefer the first game. I think it tells a better story and it feels like a more cohesive and special experience. The gameplay is simple. You're exploring environments, solving some puzzles, and you are fighting enemies with a pretty basic combat system. However, the presentation and the storytelling is very unique. That is where this game really sets itself apart. It's because of the story that it's telling and because of the way that it is telling it, it's definitely something that I think you should play for yourself and experience. It's also a straightforward, linear game that won't waste your time. There's not a lot of extra fluff to this game. It is its basic gameplay pillars and the story that it wants to tell. The next game on my list is Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread stars Samus Aran, so who is she? Samus is an ex-soldier of the Galactic Federation who became a bounty hunter. She uses a powerful exoskeleton that is equipped with an arm cannon that can fire a variety of different weapons and missiles. She's a character that you will probably instantly recognize even if you haven't played her games, thanks to her appearance in Super Smash Bros. She's been around since 1986, which makes her one of the oldest protagonists in gaming that's still around today, let alone a female protagonist. She has a no-nonsense attitude that shines through, even if she doesn't really speak that much. She is a total badass when it comes to combat, and she looks great doing it. Very stylish, very flashy, very awesome. So why do I like the game? I've dabbled in a few other Metroid games, but the game that made me fall in love with Samus was Metroid Dread. It's the only Metroid game that I have played from start to finish. It does a great job of presenting who Samus is as a character without using a lot of dialogue. You get the idea of who she is through how she acts, in the gameplay and in the cutscenes and in her interactions with other characters, her interactions with enemies, things like that. Also, it's just a really fast-paced and fun action Metroidvania game. I know it's kind of ironic to call a Metroid game a Metroidvania, but here we are. With the exception of a couple boss fights, one of them being the final boss, I was able to maintain momentum throughout Metroid Dread without getting lost or needing to look things up online, and this isn't always the case for games in this genre. Because of this, I think Metroid Dread is a fantastic choice for someone looking to try Metroidvania games for the first time. The next game I want to talk about is Plague Tale: Innocence, but also a Plague Tale Requiem, let's be honest. Plague Tale stars Amicia Darun as our female protagonist. She is the older sister to Hugo de Rune, who is a little boy with a mysterious curse called the Macula, which is very closely related to the plague and hordes of rats that are central to the story of the series. In the first game, Amicia is a capable but somewhat naive girl who is just doing her best to protect her little brother in a really terrible situation. In the second game, her character development is taken up a notch as she has become angry and jaded with the world and is slow to trust other people. She's a great hunter and extremely adaptable. She overcomes the odds that are stacked against her. She's also a really beautiful picture of perseverance, hope, anger, love, and grief throughout the course of the two games. And all of this is elevated by some of the best voice acting I've ever heard in a game. So why do I like these games so much? Firstly, because of what I mentioned above. Amicia is an incredible, well-realized character, and she's one of a cast of characters that are all mostly written and performed just as well. The story is also really well done, but brace yourself because it isn't a happy one. The gameplay is stealth and puzzle solving. Think The Last of Us, but with no combat. You are playing as a child, after all. But the rats and the light mechanic, along with the grim setting, keep the relatively simple gameplay feeling fresh. If you like well-written, well-realized, well-acted characters, if you like grim, dark stories, and if you like stealth games that aren't overly challenging or complicated, definitely give the Plague Tale series a try. The next game I want to talk about is Horizon Forbidden West mostly, but also Horizon Zero Dawn. Our lead character in this series is Aloy. So, who is Aloy? Aloy has a pretty interesting sci-fi background, but I'm not here to spoil these games, so at a base level, she is an incredible hunter and survivor due to her being an outcast for most of her life. Throughout most of the first game, Horizon Zero Dawn, I found her to be pretty bland. I think the ending of that game definitely makes her more interesting and kind of makes you look back on the experience a little bit differently once you've reached the end. But the main reason that I like Aloy so much as a character is who she develops into in the second game in the series, Horizon Forbidden West. She is much more self-aware and she does not enjoy the life of a hero. Having saved the world in the first game, she's now famous and people in the world who she comes across on her adventure have heard of her and they want to idolize her and they want to give her all these accolades. But she's not really a fan of this. She just wants to get her job done. She's not used to the fame. She's kind of over it all. And I found that to be a fun take on the hero storyline. Also, the second game does a really good job of filling out the cast around her, making them more fleshed out and making the relationships between her and the cast of characters around her more meaningful, and just overall thought did a good job of making Aloy a standout character that is actually something special and someone to be talked about. She's also just pretty awesome when it comes to her abilities in combat, which leads me into what do I like about the games themselves. While I like Aloy a lot more in the second game as far as her character, both games are pretty similar when it comes to their gameplay. The first game does have the benefit of being a mystery of what's going on in this world, and you, as you go through it, you and Aloy both trying to figure out what happened, and that's pretty cool. However, both games are open world, and they come with the tropes of that genre, which I personally like, but if you don't, I totally get that. But the combat is where the gameplay really shines and stands out, specifically against the giant robot dinosaurs. That is the beating heart and the soul of the Horizon series. The interesting lore and setup and story and characters and all that is good, and I enjoy it, but the gameplay is kind of the standout feature. Before we get into the final entry on my list here, if you're enjoying this video, please leave a comment sharing your favorite game with a great female protagonist and consider subscribing to the channel. Moving on to the final entry on my list, we're going to be talking about Tomb Raider. We have to end with the OG, and if you don't at least recognize this character, you've probably been living under a rock. It's Lara Croft. I'm talking specifically about the recent trilogy of games from Crystal Dynamics, so Tomb Raider, The Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. At the time of recording this video, there is a new Tomb Raider series in development, but we have not seen much from that yet. So Lara Croft is a highly intelligent British archaeologist who winds up in over-the-top situations that blend history and archaeology with the fantastical. She uses her intelligence and abilities with a bow and firearms to survive against the brutal environments that she explores, as well as the many enemies trying to kill her. In this trilogy of games, we get to see her grow from a younger woman just trying to survive to a more seasoned explorer who is outgoing and is embracing her role and trying to save the world. So why do I like these games? I really like this interpretation of the character. She is less sexualized and has a bit more personality than some of the previous iterations. Outside of the character, though, I really like the gameplay in these games. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a third-person action game with a focus on exploration and puzzle solving, navigating tombs, exploring, finding the treasure. All that is in these games. It also has third-person combat, shooting, some stealth, and it's just one of those classic action-adventure experiences. The blockbuster style of game. The story in these games focuses usually on solving some sort of a fantastical mystery while trying to save a group of people or eventually the world. I think that the stories, the overall stories, obviously you have to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief. There's a little bit of magic in them. But I think where it really shines is the stories and the character interactions. Like Lara and her relationships and interactions with the other cast of characters around her. I think the standout one that persists through all three games alongside her is her best friend Jonah, and seeing those relationships and kind of following these characters through the trilogy of games I think is one of the highlights. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you haven't played these games for whatever reason, I think they're definitely worth checking out. So that is my list of games with awesome female protagonists that I enjoy and recommend. If you have any games to add to the list, drop them in the comments below. That's it for this video. Stay friendly, gamers.